Hi, I'm Councilwoman Jane Bonner, and I'm here with my friends from Stony Brook University Hospital kidney transplant team and Chief of Staff to the Supervisor Ed Romaine, Emily Pines. And Emily and I share something that very few people share. We are both living kidney donors.
Yes.
And April was Donor Awareness Month in the town of Brookhaven, and I had my friends from Stony Brook University Hospital to come give a presentation regarding living organ donation, especially kidneys. Why don't you guys introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do?
Thank you. I'm Frank Darris. I'm the medical director for the kidney transplant program. I'm also kidney transplant surgeon and living donor kidney surgeon.
I'm Dawn Francis Quinney. I'm the administrative director of the kidney transplant program.
And I'm Steve Napick. I am the Living Donor Coordinator for Stony Brook University Medical Center.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to do this little Channel 18 spot was because I'm a 2-year living kidney donor. I just had my 2-year anniversary. My numbers are all good. And I wanted to bring awareness to the fact that New York State is the last state in the United States with the lowest amount of organ donors. And I wanted to raise awareness to the Brookhaven viewing audience on Channel 18. And you won't be surprised how many people watch Channel 18. There's a lot of Channel 18 watchers out there. And bring you guys here to talk about the real need for kidneys, live kidneys, to keep people off dialysis. That I always say that God gives you 2 kidneys, so you should share one, share the spare. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
With kidney failure, the options are either dialysis or kidney transplant. Without either of those, patients would die because of kidney failure and uremia. If dialysis was easy, we would not do kidney transplants,
Right.
and that's how we look at it with all the patients. Unfortunately, in New York and especially New York State, some of the longest waiting times in the country for kidney transplant. And the opportunities are living kidney donors and deceased donors, but the big opportunity is living kidney donation of healthy people. And I think many people just are not aware and don't realize the process and what it takes to be able to donate a kidney to somebody in need.
You know, so Emily and I are case in point that, Emily, you donated how many years ago?
Let's see, it was 2002, and I was about Jane Bonner's age. I won't say what it is.
I will be 54 in August.
Yeah, when I donated my kidney, and of course, I believe that was when the medical profession didn't have as good a process as it does now in terms of kidney donation. But it's an amazing thing, Jane.
You know, and so Emily and I share this experience where not too many people that you know have shared an organ. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, and Emily agreed, was to bring the human side to kidney donation or organ donation. That 2 years later, my numbers are perfect. Doctor said that they're exactly where they should be. And I live to tell the tale with absolutely no complications from it. So, Dawn, why don't you talk a little bit about your role on the transplant team?
I'm the administrative director of the program, so I kind of oversee everything. I have history, my background is as a kidney transplant nurse on the floor, taking care of both the living donors and the transplant recipients. So we really try to raise awareness, just like we're doing here today, which is great, to spread the word, to let people know that there is such a need for this. Anybody's best opportunity is living donation. It's the fastest way to transplant. So someone who's maybe not on dialysis yet, it could maybe get them to the point where they don't need to start dialysis, and we can do the transplant before then. If they are on dialysis, it can get them off of dialysis quicker than waiting on the wait list, because as Dr. Darris said, the waiting times are long, and longest in New York State. As you alluded to, we are number 50 out of 50 states for the amount of registered donors. We are trying to bring awareness, and we have done a lot with our local organ procurement organization throughout the state to try to increase the amount of registered donors, and we've done a great job with that. But the amount of residents in New York we still have a lot more work to
That's
do.
why I wanted to do this. I just really wanted to bring awareness. Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit, how many years have you been doing this?
32 years I've been involved with organ tissue donation and transplantation. I actually got started in organ donation early on, around 1984. I was a ICU nurse at a local hospital in Nassau County, and we had a young trauma victim come in, and the neurosurgeon was going to declare this young gentleman brain dead. And at that time, as an RN, I says, too bad we can't take his organs and use them for transplant. And at that time, we made a few phone calls, and we found out that Stony Brook Medical Center had a transplant team. They sent coordinators to the hospital. We spoke with the family. We recovered the organs, and we transplanted them the next day at Stony Brook. They invited me to come. I watched the transplant, and it was at that time I says, that's what I want to do. And I've been doing it since 1986. Stony Brook has performed over 1,500 transplants since its inception, and about 560 are about from living organ donors.
Wow.
So my job is to work up the living organ donor, someone who wants to give a kidney, such as yourselves, to help somebody else out. And it's the living donor that's the true superheroes of transplant. If it wasn't for you, transplant would not occur, and also to our deceased donor families. So it's an amazing process, to watch a kidney work. Even this day, 32 years later, it's just an amazing process when this gentleman puts them in.
It's, so in the interest of full disclosure, the pain factor for the person donating the kidney is much greater for the person getting the kidney. I experienced this firsthand. The next day, I was uncomfortable. It's important to let people know that it is surgery. They do remove it laparoscopically most times.
Now they do.
Yeah, so Emily, but my friend who I donated to, we were a 5 out of 6 match, by the way, was sitting up in bed eating lentil soup the next day, and I was not.
How many days, Jane?
It was only a couple of days.
All right.
It was only a couple of days. But my surgery was not done at Stony Brook. It was done at New York Presbyterian Weill Cornell. But I have to say that any hospital that I've known and people that I've spoken to, because this has become somewhat of a soapbox of mine to bring awareness, because my friend was so sick, and it was the first time that I was made aware of something like this. Even though I'm a smart person and I know all about it, it was the first time I had the opportunity to realize, well, wait a minute, we're the same blood type. I'll be tested. In a group of us, probably 7 of us agreed to be tested, and for whatever reason, at the initial blood work, everybody else was tossed out, and I just moved to the top of the pack. And every step of the way, the transplant team does say, do you still want to do this? Do you still want to do this? It's important for people to know that even if you change your mind, you're allowed to change your mind. It's not like you sign over your body part and then they say, sorry, it's too late. You are allowed to change your mind.
And that's important, because that's why Steve works with the living donors, not with the recipients. We have other coordinators that work just with the recipients for that reason exactly. He looks after and protects the living donors, so that every single step of the way he can guide them. And if at any point they don't want to proceed, he's there to help them.
And there's a full social worker makeup. You have to meet with various members of the team. I tell people all the time, it's the most amazing physical you'll ever have, and it's the $1 million physical. It's the $1 million physical. I had it was such an intense physical that I only just started going back to the doctor recently.
We've heard that from some of our
I
donors.
wanted to say to the doctor, I mean, in my particular case, the donee needed a pancreas, ultimately.
Okay.
And so, because of the donation of the kidney, he was able to have the second.
So now he's no
operation.
longer insulin dependent.
Yeah, and he is
My friend had a pancreas
not
transplant
only
too.
still alive, but he's still working and living a life after 16 years.
That's great.
And the goal is to make the living donor better. Make the recipient better. My goal is to keep the living donor safe. And safe just doesn't mean physically getting you through the surgery. It means body, mind, and soul. That we don't harm you physically, financially, emotionally. And we have a multidisciplinary team of social workers, nutritionists, surgeons, people that will talk to these living donors and always give them the option of backing out if they need to.
Right.
But the living donor saves 2 lives through donation. You save the life of the person you gave the organ to, plus you free up another kidney for somebody else waiting for a deceased donor transplant. So you're the true superheroes.
2 for 1.
I always thought you all should be wearing capes and leotards.
We've never made a donor better, so the whole process is to make sure we don't make a donor worse.
Right.
And the reality is I think we're really very, very good at it, because the two of you are living proof that you go after donating a kidney and live a normal life, and people live normal length and activity. People who have had transplants as well as living kidney donors have gone on to be professional athletes, musicians, everything that they've wanted to do, professors at universities, and it's a remarkable
Judges.
process.
Judges and now chief of staff.
And the reality is our process is not a rubber stamp. Steve would tell you, we probably rule out at least a third of the people that come through because of the rigorous physical, the testing that we do. But it's really important that we do it right. And so we can all comfortably say we're very pleased. The donors do well. They've all done well with surgery, and even with the initial discomfort, which is often more gas pains or
That's
bloating.
exactly what it was.
It's
You
not
can't-
surgical
It's
incisional
not.
pain.
It was gas.
It's
It was
that-
gas.
The vast majority go
Telling the
home
world
and
about
It
this.
was
That's it.
well, you
That's
know.
it.
Full disclosure.
That's it.
It was-
But
listen, we're talking about
what
it.
it is. But yet people usually go home 48 hours, sometimes 72 hours, and they're back. Everybody's different. And
I was
we
back to
can't
work in
tell.
10 days.
Yep. And we, men, women, young girl, you can never always tell in advance, but people recover quickly, and they go on not only physically, but I think, emotionally. The donors do very well long term. And the transplant patients, it's the transplant patient's best opportunity. They get transplanted either before they need dialysis, or you minimize their time on dialysis. They do better, the kidneys last longer, they function better.
And we were sharing before we started recording, Emily and I, and the three of us, Emily and I were sharing the selfish aspect of it, of donation, how good it made us feel to have such a positive impact. And, Emily was just talking about how great her recipient's doing. My recipient sold his business and now has his dream job that he's always wanted to do in his late 50s. So he started his life all over. He did a complete 180 in his life, and is living a life that, wouldn't have been possible
That's right.
without a living donor me donating my kidney to him. And he was, I can still see his face when we were in the city, because all my testing was done in Manhattan, and I can do a lot of things, but I cannot drive in Manhattan. I can't drive into the city. I can drive into Queens and take the subway, but I cannot drive in the city. So for the first part of the testing, my husband was away, so my friend Tom had to pick me up. Now, he lives in Eaton's Neck. I live in Rocky Point.
Right.
And every appointment I had in the city was at 9 o'clock. It is impossible to get into Manhattan at 9 o'clock in the morning. You can get there at 8, or you can get there at 10. You can't get there at 9. So he would come from Eaton's Neck all the way to Rocky Point, practically in the middle of the night. I could never eat, but he could eat. And I would watch him. We'd go to this little donut shop up the road from the hospital, and I would watch him drink coffee, and eat a donut. But it brought us closer. And I saw toward the end with the last test, when they do the compatibility, the last part of the compatibility, he could barely walk a city block. And his nephrologist did not want him to start dialysis. The nephrologist was like, the surgery is scheduled for 10 days. Just, his levels were crazy. We don't want to start you on dialysis and go that route. Just hold out. We're going to do the typing, and see, because we should talk a little bit about direct donation and what my husband calls the baseball trade.
Kidney pair donation. Yeah.
Going out into the exchange. Why don't you guys talk a little bit about that, the two different types of donations that can happen?
So a direct donation would be if like what you did with your friend, you had somebody that you wanted to give to, and you were a match to him for all intents and purposes, and you were able to give directly to him. If you wanted to give to him, but you weren't a match to him, maybe you weren't the same blood type, maybe he had antibodies to you, for whatever reason, there's the kidney pair donation, which is something that you can do, which is a kidney swap, for another term
Right.
for it, which is where we would put you into another pool or another list, so to speak, where you would go in there with your recipient along with other people who are in the same boat as you. So other people that don't have a donor, but they don't match for whatever reason. And then it's a computer-generated system that will spit out, matches every so often. And then you swap the blood. Could be anywhere in the country. So it could be, we can have multiple ones. We can have three-way exchange. We've done a couple of three-way
Kidneys
exchanges.
and coolers on planes.
Exactly.
That's
yeah.
really amazing.
Yeah. And it's another way to try to get a transplant quicker when you have a living donor. So it's something that we try to educate all of our recipients on, is if you have a living donor that you don't match to for whatever reason, it's okay. You don't have to be the same blood type, because we can do the kidney swap.
Because if your
Right.
thought process is to donate anyway,
Right. If you're going to donate, you're still helping.
put it out there for somebody that you'll be a better match
Right.
to, so the person that needs the kidney that you couldn't donate to could get the best possible
Right.
match.
That's
And,
amazing.
Yeah,
process.
and for example, if you have a three-way swap, you have, 6 people whose lives were saved in one day, right? You have
Wow.
the 3 people that got their transplant from the living donors in the swap, and then the 3 people that you opened up the list to.
Right,
Because
right.
there are plenty of people on the list that do not have a living donor. Many of these diseases run in families. Many people, high blood pressure, diabetes, we're very stringent on the donors, so somebody may not even
I think it's
have a
important
healthy
to
person
elaborate
donate.
that,
Yes,
on that.
it
I
is.
think that there's a fear that organs will be harvested, that the need that you'll just take the kidney because the person is so sick that you'll take whatever kidney or any kidney. I think it's important to elaborate on that, because I tell people that all the time. Let the medical experts decide whether or not your kidney is, don't be afraid to check off the donor on a donor portion of your license. I think it's very sinister to think
Yeah.
Yes.
that
You know,
that they'll let you die so they
Right.
can harvest
the
your
hospital
organs.
personnel and the EMS and the police, they don't have access to the donor registry.
Right.
So if there's a car accident or somebody comes into the emergency room and, they're going to try to save that life that's in front of them. They don't know that they're a donor. They're not looking at any of that stuff. They have the person in front of
This
them.
is
that they're
not
trying
body
to save. This
snatchers.
is not, exactly.
Right.
No, the
So
whole-
that is a huge myth that has been
I'm
around
glad we're
forever. I
touching
think.
upon it.
The process takes a long time. From the time a person comes in the emergency room, and again, nobody in the transplant team, whether the organ procurement organization, a transplant surgeon, is involved in any way until all efforts to resuscitate the person have been exhausted, and then they are declared brain dead or they are going to be a donor. There's a strict dividing line between donor and transplant. So that whole process, the idea that, well, they'll be left to die because Mr. Jones upstairs needs a kidney and Mr. Smith needs a liver or something, just doesn't
It's
happen.
a sinister thought process.
Yes.
It really,
No, it
really
is.
is.
Actually,
it's an urban legend.
Yes.
something you said was very interesting. So, based upon your testing of people, doctor, do you find a lot of instances where members of the family are not adequate donors?
Oh, yes, yes, that it may be either blood type, it may be antibodies where they would react. I always love, if I could add a little, the whole, as far as urban myths. So the myth of, you find somebody in a hotel room in a bathtub full of ice because they had somebody came and snatched their kidney.
Wow.
Okay.
I had never
don't
heard
think
of
I've
that.
one, but okay.
So the thing that always makes me chuckle is nobody's worried. We don't ever put the donor on ice. So what?
No, I
what
was
kind
never
of a
put on
myth
ice.
is that? No, it's
Why
the
not?
kidney. The kidney. So some of these things that are myth. There's so many. Unfortunately, there are myths, and the reality is the whole process is so respectful for the donors and the transplant patients, and the amount
That is
that
true.
goes into it, and the heart and soul, so that Steve mentioned, for as many years as we've done this, we still get excited when we see urine coming out of the tubing.
I
could be in
understand
the
it's an
operating
exciting.
room.
I heard
yes.
the same thing.
Yes,
They get,
yes.
really
It
is.
worked right away.
So-
and it's while they're
So-
still undergoing the surgery.
Yes.
It's, it's amazing.
And so, and unfortunately, many people do not have a living donor, and so they go on the waiting list, and that's where then people, if they've signed their donor card, they're in the New York State Registry to be an organ donor is very important. It's a process that's getting a lot of effort around the state, as well as, we've participated in many events to try to increase the New York State Registry as well. I think, with some success,
Yeah.
but still, the number of people with high blood pressure, diabetes,
Yes.
kidney failure just keeps going up.
When I first got involved in transplant in '86, we had about 13,000 people in the entire country waiting for a organ transplant. Most of those were kidney patients. And here we are in 2018, and we have, as of today, just short of 115,000.
Wow.
And we lose 20 people every day die waiting for an organ transplant.
That's too bad.
And these people wait, and we added, about another 15 every 10 minutes
Yeah.
Really?
to the list. And people die waiting for a deceased donor transplant. That's why living donation is so important as yourselves, because you stepped up to the plate and you actually saved a life, and you shortened the waiting time for those who needed an organ.
I think what your role seems very significant to me. I still remember 100 years ago sitting with the person who was talking to me about my feeling, etc. And so I like the idea
You're
that
like an angel of mercy in
No,
a
no.
lab
You-
coat.
really?
We're the middlemen. You're the angels of mercy. That's how I like to look at it. If it wasn't for the donors, we wouldn't be doing transplants.
That's right.
The only thing I didn't like about the person who spoke to me was that when he told me that I couldn't drink coffee afterwards because I was so addicted. But
So I never have. I have a I have to have a low protein diet because I only have one kidney, and I mean it, and my health has never been better because I'm eating a lot less red meat than I
Sure.
used to.
Yeah, your diet shouldn't change all that much.
I didn't. I still drink. So
You
when
can still
Emily
have
told me about this coffee thing, I go, "What are you talking about? I have my cup of coffee every day."
The remaining kidney will grow to compensate. If each
Eventually.
kidney does 50%, usually within 3 to 6 months, it will do 75 to 80%.
Yes.
So as long as people are within reason, you have that cup of coffee, that's fine. If you now have a donut with your friend, that's fine. As long as you don't go too crazy on things, and
That's
the other
good health
thing,
advice anyway.
exactly. And the other thing we try to tell the donors is you have to get your physical exam and labs every 6 months, every 12 months. That's just smart.
yes.
Taking care of yourself, as far as, what you eat. And, as people get older, they may develop high blood pressure or things. But if you're getting checked regularly, it
You
will
stay
all
on
be
top of it,
monitored.
yep.
And so people who have donated kidneys have lived 50, 60 years. There's no decrease in life expectancy, development of kidney disease or anything. We're extremely thorough with the workups on the living donors. There are actually a few kidneys out there that were transplanted from people in their 60s that were transplanted over 40 years. There are some people whose kidneys have lasted 50 years. When they do the math on how old the kidneys are, they're over 100 years old.
That's amazing.
Wow.
So these kidneys can last. Our goal when we do every kidney transplant is that kidney will last as long as the patient.
That's
Have
wonderful.
a full life.
A full life, because, eventually people will develop other things. As we say, Father Time is undefeated.
Right.
But, if we get to the point where eventually somebody will pass of something other than their kidneys, then we've all done our job.
Yeah.
We've done it to the max.
Yeah.
And it's, anytime, a transplant patient, just like anybody, passes, it's not a happy event.
No.
But if it's of something else and they've lived their life, we also know the vast majority of the time they would not have lived as long or as well on dialysis.
Right. Think about that.
Yep.
And your recipients were very fortunate to have the two of you to be living donors. Some people don't have family members or friends to be living donors. So at Stony Brook, we're encouraging the recipients to become their own donor champions by using social media, by using their community, their church, their synagogue, to go out there and say, hey, I need a transplant.
That's good.
I will live longer. I will feel better. I need a kidney. And there's nothing wrong with being your own donor champion, because that's how you're going to get transplanted.
So, because I have used Channel 18 and me being a councilwoman to talk ad nauseum about kidney donation, I've become somewhat of a mentor, and I share it on Facebook. A friend of mine that I grew up with has a friend that was in Disney that he saw a man in Disney that had a T-shirt on that said, I need a kidney. Will you be my donor? So he said that his friend was compelled to go up and introduce himself to this man in the T-shirt at Disney and said, I'm interested in becoming your donor. And he was talking to his friend that I knew, and Charlie said, Janie, can I put him in touch with you? I said, absolutely, I would be happy to mentor him. And I have been.
What a
That's
cool
great.
story.
And it's all because I've been sharing on Facebook.
But you're a donor champion.
Right.
That's
Yes.
it. And people can be creative in how they do it. We cannot do that for any of the patients, but the patients. And you know, healthcare, a lot of people are very private about their lives or their health. So to get them to speak up for themselves is not always easy. That's part of what we do, especially Steve and Dawn.
Yeah.
Right. We've taken a big push in educating our recipients and our anybody that comes in as a donor to try to be their own donor champion, to talk and share their story and put it out there. We've actually had a big increase in altruistic donors, people that see these posts and say, you know, I don't know you, but I want to try to donate to you.
I can't stand social media because I think it's just been the downfall of society on some levels. I think it's just keyboard commandos and a lot of bullies come out of the woodwork. But for something like this, it's really been very beneficial, I think.
It has been.
No, some of the stories are remarkable. I know for the sake of time and privacy we can't, but I'm amazed with every person we transplant. They've gone through kidney disease, kidney failure,
Yes.
dialysis.
Yes.
Their strength is remarkable. And these people that donate are the most giving, heartfelt, kind people you could ever want to meet. And I think we're always amazed at the stories and the backgrounds of some of these pairings of donors and recipients. So if we get that point across that, we have a process that looks out for the donors first, because we know we don't make
And
money,
that's
but also
exactly
to get
that's
people
exactly the
transplanted.
case. I mean, the care for the donor from the start to finish, and even the follow-up, quite frankly, is very comprehensive. I mean, it's not a literal cut and run.
Right.
We've got it, we're gone.
Right.
We're
you know?
responsible
We're
for seeing you after surgery, 6 months after surgery, a year after surgery, 2 years after surgery. And we don't forget about you.
That's the donors, yes.
Yeah.
We don't forget about the
That's it.
donors. In
Yeah.
fact, Stony Brook will be having its second annual Living Donor Ceremony.
I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
where
Good for you.
You're having it on town board night, so I can't attend.
Well, we're going to be having where our recipients are going to be handing the New York State Organ Donor Medal of Honor to their
their
donors.
donors.
Oh,
And it's a wonderful ceremony.
Yes.
It's the least we can do as a transplant team.
I might actually miss town board for that then.
Yeah.
See what
That
you
would
can
be
do.
really
We'd be-
Don't
we
tell
would
the
love to
residents
have
in
you.
your
Well, so Emily will go.
No,
Emily will be
that's
my
it.
date.
It's really a wonderful event because it's an event where the transplant team and the recipients, we get to come together and really give our thanks to the donors who, like Steve said before, are the true heroes. And we make that night about the living donors and we celebrate them. Really.
My nephrologist at the New York Presbyterian has a phrase that he says, "How about them donors?"
That's it.
How about
That's
them
it.
donors?
And I can tell you as a surgeon, because I do a lot of kidney transplants, but I do all of our laparoscopic donors. There's probably no operation I do that I'm more neurotic about, that attention to detail. I mean, I am every single day. That's what I do when I get up. But the donor operation is the one that I probably stress the most over, because I'm not making them better. And I have to make sure everybody's on their A game. And it works. patients universally do very well. We're very pleased with how the patients do the donation and the transplants.
I like your comment about how you have these incredible stories about people coming from very different walks of life and different ethnicities, and that makes
Yes.
it, that don't even know, as I did, the person until we met, and being
Right.
very, very, from very different, let's say, gene pools.
That's it. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
And I didn't even share one scintilla of heritage with my friend. He's 100% Italian, and I am the exact opposite of 100% Italian.
What percent Italian are you?
We shared we only shared a blood type and a friendship for
and
over
you don't,
30
and
years.
that's the thing, is you don't have to share any of that.
No,
and I think
that's it.
that's another myth that people think, you know, you have to be a perfect match. You have to be
Right.
that's not true.
You know, sometimes friends are better donors because they don't have the genetic predispositions that the recipients have. You know, sometimes apples don't fall far from trees.
He's told me that he thinks my kidneys made him more feisty. So, because I'm a pretty feisty.
I'm not surprised in your
Some-
case.
Because I'm pretty feisty.
Sometimes the genetics of some of these things that run into families, plus I'll joke with some of the not everybody even likes all their family members, so probably, but, you know, what is it, probably close to 40% of our living donors are non-blood relatives.
Yes,
You know,
that's
which,
right.
which 25 years ago was unheard of. You know, this started in the 90s about non-blood relatives. It used to be you had to be a blood relative, and you had to be a certain match.
Really?
But our anti-rejection medicines have gotten
Yes.
to
They've
where,
been game changers.
as long as you're compatible blood type, and you know, whether you know the match, our medications are better than ever.
And my donee was Irish, and
Emily is not.
I'm not Irish. And
Wrong with that.
I am. And he liked to play golf in a place that, let's say, in the past may not have accepted people of a certain ethnicity. So I told him that he had to call his new kidney Moisha and go play on the golf course. And he promised me he would.
Right on the links, right,
That's
Em?
it.
Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you all enough for coming here and being on Channel 18 and imparting your wisdom, sharing with the residents of Brookhaven a little bit about what you do, about living organ donation, especially kidneys. I know that at the end of this, our fabulous IT department's going to splice in some statistics from the PowerPoint that you brought to town board in April, and how people can learn about being living organ donors. But why don't you give the website for anybody so you can at least say it?
Sure. Our website is www.stonybrookmedicine.edu/transplant. And the main number to our transplant office is 631-444-2209. So anybody who has questions about living donation or transplantation is welcome to call.
And if anybody is considering being living organ donors, Emily and I are very readily available and reachable by phone at Brookhaven. All you have to do is call 451-TOWN, and one of our wonderful operators will transport. I almost said transplant. Transfer you to our offices. So thank you all very much for coming, and I
Thank
hope
you.
we
Thank you.
educated
Thanks
a
for
lot of the
having us.
residents in
Thank
Brookhaven.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.